Marcelo Bielsa should have been in Miami. Hours before one of the biggest matches of Uruguay's World Cup campaign, he should have been standing on a training pitch near Hard Rock Stadium, walking through final tactical adjustments with Darwin Núñez, Federico Valverde, Rodrigo Bentancur, Jose Maria Jimenez, and the rest of a squad expected to challenge anyone in this tournament. Instead, he was waiting inside a hotel room in Cancun, Mexico, not preparing, not conducting a final training session, not giving his last team talk, not running through set pieces, waiting, because somehow, on the day of a World Cup match in the United States, the Uruguay national team could not enter the United States. And the explanation that followed only made the situation more confusing. According to the Uruguayan Football Association, the problem was completely outside their control. Their departure was delayed until late afternoon on the day of the match itself. A brief statement was released. 4 lines. Short, direct. One organization was identified as responsible, FIFA. That single accusation immediately transformed what looked like a travel inconvenience into something much bigger. Because flights get delayed, planes have issues, weather causes disruptions, those things happen. But when a World Cup team says FIFA is responsible for preventing them from reaching their match destination just hours before kickoff, people start asking different questions. What exactly went wrong, and why did nobody seem to have the same answer? The first reports began spreading through football media almost immediately. Investigative journalist Romain Molina described the situation as a catastrophe, not a delay, not a logistical inconvenience, a catastrophe. And as more outlets began confirming the story, the details became increasingly difficult to ignore. Uruguay's charter flight from Cancun to Miami is not some impossible international journey. This is not crossing continents. This is not a 12-hour flight. This is roughly 2 hours, a short trip, a routine movement for an elite national team participating in the biggest sporting event on Earth. Yet the aircraft remained grounded, the squad remained stranded, and the clock kept moving. That alone would have been embarrassing. Then came the next problem. Because FIFA regulations require teams to fulfill certain media obligations before matches, press conferences, media appearances, official commitments, the kinds of events every team is expected to attend. Uruguay missed theirs, not because they refused, not because they arrived late, not because they were unprepared, because they were stuck in another country. And suddenly an uncomfortable question appeared. If FIFA's organizational failures prevented Uruguay from attending mandatory FIFA events, could FIFA still punish Uruguay for failing to attend those events? Think about that for a moment. The organization responsible for the problem also possesses the authority to issue penalties for the consequences of that problem. The deeper people looked into the situation, the stranger it became. Then FIFA released its own version of events. And now there were 2 stories. Uruguay's federation pointed toward documentation issues and authorization problems. FIFA pointed toward a mechanical issue involving the aircraft. Both explanations could not fully coexist. One side suggested bureaucratic failures, the other suggested technical failures. One blamed administration, the other blamed machinery, and immediately the focus shifted from the flight itself to something potentially more serious. Who was telling the truth? Because if this was merely a mechanical issue, why was FIFA being blamed so directly? And if it was truly an authorization issue, how could something so fundamental remain unresolved on the day of a World Cup match? Those questions became even more significant when people started looking beyond Uruguay, because that's when the list emerged, and the list changed everything. At first, Uruguay looked like an isolated incident. One team, one flight, one disruption. Then people started comparing notes. Different countries, different officials, different entry points, different border crossings, yet remarkably similar outcomes. Jibril Rajoub, officially accredited, still facing entry complications. Omar Artan, a FIFA referee, subjected to extensive questioning and ultimately denied entry. Thomas Partey, one of Ghana's most recognizable players, unable to participate after immigration complications reportedly prevented normal travel arrangements. The Iranian national team facing prolonged delays. Iraqi players encountering visa bottlenecks. Additional participants dealing with technical authorization issues. One story became 2, 2 became 5, 5 became a pattern, and patterns are much harder to dismiss. Now suddenly Uruguay's flight was no longer the story. The story was the system. Because if one referee experiences difficulties, maybe that's an exception. If one executive faces delays, perhaps that's unusual. If one team encounters problems, maybe that's unfortunate. But when examples start appearing across multiple federations, multiple nationalities, multiple categories of participants, the conversation changes. This stops looking random and starts looking structural. That is what made the Uruguay incident so important. important. Uruguay is not an obscure football nation. This is not a federation operating on limited resources. This is a two-time World Cup champion, a historic football power, a nation filled with elite players competing at the highest level of European football. If they can find themselves stranded before a match, who exactly is protected from these problems? The answer appeared to be nobody, and that brought attention to an uncomfortable reality surrounding this tournament. For years, the North American World Cup was presented as a logistical masterpiece. 3 host countries, modern infrastructure, major airports, world-class stadiums, advanced transportation networks. The sales pitch was simple. This would be easier, more efficient, more accessible, bigger than ever before. Yet within the opening stages of the tournament, the conversation was increasingly dominated by border issues, visa concerns, authorization delays, and entry complications. The very thing that was supposed to be a strength was becoming a vulnerability. And that's where geopolitics entered the story. Because FIFA can organize matches, FIFA can sell sponsorships, FIFA can schedule fixtures, FIFA can generate billions, but FIFA does not control sovereign borders. And that distinction suddenly mattered more than ever. When questions emerged regarding these entry issues, American authorities pointed toward existing immigration and security procedures. Their position was straightforward. The World Cup does not override national law. The World Cup does not eliminate security requirements. The World Cup does not automatically grant entry. Every case must pass through established procedures. From a legal perspective, that argument is understandable. From a tournament perspective, it creates a massive problem because FIFA's event depends entirely upon the ability of people to move. Players, referees, officials, federation executives, media representatives, support staff. Without movement, the entire machine starts breaking down. And what Uruguay exposed was the collision between 2 completely different systems. One system focused on hosting the largest sporting event in the world. The other focused on enforcing national border regulations. Neither system appeared willing to bend, and the people trapped in the middle were the participants. The irony is impossible to ignore. The World Cup has never been bigger, never more expensive, never more commercially valuable, never more ambitious. Yet some of the most basic operational requirements seem increasingly difficult to guarantee. Simply getting accredited participants across borders has become a challenge. That is not the image FIFA spent years promoting, and critics have begun asking whether this was predictable all along, because this isn't the first time concerns were raised about travel logistics in North America. It's not the first time questions emerged regarding distances, scheduling, transportation demands, or administrative complexity. Those warnings existed. Many were dismissed. Now some of them appear much harder to ignore. Of course, there is a counter-argument. Supporters of FIFA's position would say no sporting organization can control immigration policy. No tournament organizer can override sovereign governments. No football authority can simply demand unrestricted access across international borders. And there is truth in that argument, but that is also where the controversy refuses to disappear, because critics are not asking FIFA to control governments. They are asking whether FIFA adequately planned for realities that were entirely predictable. Those are different questions, very different questions, and that distinction is why the debate continues, because every new delay creates another headline, every new authorization issue creates another controversy, every new border complication creates another example, and examples accumulate. They don't disappear. They stack one on top of another until eventually people stop discussing individual incidents and start discussing institutional competence. That is the real danger here. Not one delayed flight. Not one missed press conference. Not one disrupted preparation schedule. Trust. Trust is the thing being tested. Trust that teams can arrive where they need to be. Trust that officials can perform their duties. Trust that tournament infrastructure can support tournament demands. Trust that organizers understand the scale of the event they created. Because once trust begins to erode, every future problem feels connected. Every future delay feels like evidence. Every future disruption feels like confirmation. And that is exactly where this story has arrived. Uruguay eventually reached Miami. The match will be played. The football itself will continue. Goals will be scored. Highlights will be shared. Attention will move elsewhere. That is probably what everyone hopes. But the bigger question remains unresolved. Because this was never really about one flight from Cancun. Cancun. It was about what that flight revealed. A World Cup projected to generate billions of dollars. An organization insisting certain problems fall outside its responsibility. A growing list of participants encountering access issues. And a tournament increasingly confronting the realities of the system it chose to build. The football will continue. The spectacle will continue. The money will continue. But so will the questions. And the biggest one is becoming harder to avoid. If an organization can claim credit for the success of a tournament worth billions, can it also claim no responsibility when the foundations underneath that tournament begin to crack? Or is Uruguay's journey from Cancun to Miami a warning that the biggest challenge facing this World Cup isn't happening on the pitch at all?